A few months ago, I released a video on Photoshop on the iPad. Long story short, the app was not well received, but now that it offers generative fill, opinions may change. I'm looking at an image from Dreamstime. Link in the description, by the way, but what I really want to do is select kind of this frame area in the background and fill it with a picture. And so painting of sorts. And so I'm going to switch over to the Polygonal Lasso tool, only I don't have one. But we do have a free form lasso tool. And now what I want to do is gen fill it. Come on, that's a 2023 thing. We're still in that year as I'm recording this. And notice right there in the taskbar, or whatever you want to call it, there's generative fill. So I'll go ahead and click on it. And what I want, in a great seafaring spirit of the olden days, is let's ask for a giant squid fighting, of course, a whale is what I'm looking for. And then I'll just hit the enter key. That should do me. And or you could click at that thing, whatever button that was. And notice we don't get the helpful little tips that are telling us all kinds of gen fill stuff as we wait, but it is quick. It is still as fast as it is, assuming you have a good internet connection, of course, as it is in Photoshop for the iPad. Now, I don't always have this problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the layers panel right there over on the right side of the screen. See that? Full layers panel, because there's a mini layers panel right up here. So we have that, but we don't have a polygonal lasso tool. We have variations on the layers panel, but not the lasso tool. And I'll bring up the properties panel as well. So we can see that we've got ourselves a generative layer, which, just as in Photoshop on the desktop, it is a special kind of smart object. Even though Photoshop on the iPad only has kind of this very narrow idea of what smart objects are, but it does support them, and it also doesn't obey my instructions. I didn't say a painting, did I? I just said giant squid fighting a whale. Instead, we end up with these strange sea creatures. That's a strange one. I've never seen that one in my undersea travels. And there's a kind of, killer whale, kind of, a little bit of a mutant. And there's my favorite crescent-shaped face animal ever. That's awesome. Let's see if we can get something more to my liking here. Although those are definitely up there, and I may have to stick with them because we may not find anything better. But notice there's my prompt. So you go to the properties panel right there. Just as you do, well, I know you do in Illustrator. That's one of the places you can find it. And so it's kind of standardized across the Adobe applications. Painting of let's try that giant squid fighting a whale. Oop, I hit the enter key, but that gave me a new line. So I'm going to have to click generate right there. Because my keyboard shortcuts are limited inside Photoshop on the iPad. One of the ones I missed so bad. I'll come to that in just a second because we're generating right now. Look at that. Oh, that's kind of a painting. It's kind of a cutout painting or something like that. And we have some rough areas in the wall. Notice that things start getting squiggly. That's because Photoshop goes ahead and redraws everything inside the selected region. This looks like he's promising. That is a whale. That whale and that squid were not fighting each other because they came up with a whale squid. That's very cool. And so is that. But let's say I wanted something like I'm going to put a sperm whale, because that is an actual animal, by the way, a sperm whale. And I can't hit the return key. I'm going to click generate. And this time around, you can see it's moving. But notice that it encountered an issue. And I'm confident that's because I indicated the wrong kind of whale. It doesn't like that. So it is still the school marm that, I'm sorry, school marms that are really cool, but the old fashioned kind that's telling you not to ask for the wrong kind of whale. But it does still do that. The period isn't going to help at this point. I'm not really sure. That period trick that everybody keeps, the full stop trick. I'm sorry for those of you across the ocean. It doesn't really work here. I don't know. Maybe it does. What I'd like to know, and I want you to tell me, comment and tell me, those of you who love that period trick, who have shared with me about 200 times now that thing exists to get rid of the orange warning. Tell me why. Why does a full stop do that? Does anybody know? Because I keep asking and then I get silence. Anyway, I'm not cranky about it or anything like that. That's a painting. And also, they weren't fighting once again. So which one's my favorite? Well, let's say it's this right here. And I was alluding a second ago to I wish that certain keyboard shortcuts worked. Because, like, let's say I want to scroll over to the right a little bit. And of course, like I've got this, mouse attached, and of course I can drag across the surface of the mouse, and because it's an Apple mouse and Mighty Mouse or whatever it's called. But I can't see what I was trying to do there. There's my period right there. Did it help me? I don't know if it did. But I was trying to get the hand tool. Why can't I get the hand? Watch what happens when you hit the H key. I want you to see over here in the toolbox what happens. If you hit the H key, oh, well, this time it's not working. Let's see, V key. Is it paying attention to me at all? Oh, it's not. Oh, I know why. Because look, this prompt is selected over here on the right side of the screen. So let's say I switch away from that layer so that there's just no chance that I'm wasting my keystrokes. I want you to see that I can't spacebar drag. Notice I'm just drawing a lasso. Why can't I? Why can't I? That is like the oldest keyboard shortcut in Photoshop. And a lot of other programs as well, Adobe. Again, just because, you might have a keyboard. If you have a keyboard, you might want to work with it. But anyway, I just want to show you what happens if you tap the H key. The H key for hand, by the way, all the tools just stop working. That's what happens. And now nothing happens when you drag. So anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with generative fill. This does. I want you to see this. I'm going to turn on, see this layer that's called Big Chandelier here up the top? I'm going to turn it on. Let's see how it works out. I am going to turn it on, Adobe program that I'm working with. Why is this not working? Oh, because I hit the H key. The H key makes the program stop working. That can't be. You can't just leave me hanging totally, can you? Yeah, that's what it does. The H key makes the program stop working. So hit the H key often for your friends. While your friends are using their iPads, go ahead and tap the H key for them and watch their bewilderment. All right, so what I wanted to show you, I have this big chandelier layer. I created that in Photoshop proper, Photoshop on the desktop, and notice now that I can switch. But this is a generative fill layer. In case I'm not making myself clear, I'm sure I'm not. And now I can select from a different chandelier. The problem, of course, is it didn't know that it was going to have a giant squid in the background, which it doesn't. It still doesn't, but it has something in the background. So I could go here. I wanted it to be big, elegant, not elephant, elegant chandelier, and click generate. And now what it's going to do is it's going to take the new background into account. So it's going to take this little bit of stuff right there, don't you know? And it's going to build upon it. Real quick, liquefy, camera raw filter, drop shadow. What do these features have in common? They're all recent additions to Photoshop on the iPad. Want to know how they work? Well, then join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DeakNow. And now back to generative fill on the iPad. So I just want to make it clear that everything is cross-platform, if you will. We normally use that for Mac versus PC, right? But I mean, Mac versus iPad or PC versus iPad, that works too. So these files are still gonna be editable back in the place where the hand tools roam. And so let's say now I'm thinking to myself, I'm gonna scroll over this way. And I want to go ahead and get rid of these. I want to see the outdoors. I don't want to see these supports right here. I just want to see big window, big outdoors. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold on the spot healing brush. And notice that we now have a remove tool. So that's a recent addition in this year, this calendar year. And so I'll go ahead and choose the remove tool. You may be familiar with the remove tool on in the desktop, where Photoshop for the desktop, that is, or on the desktop or beside the desktop, or whichever preposition we're using these days. And the idea with the remove tool is it doesn't use, even though it's got the sparklies, that threw me at first because the sparklies make me think generative, right? It doesn't need an internet connection the way generative fill does, because it's not communicating with our beloved Firefly. in the ether out there. It rather has come to know patterns, so pixel patterns, and so it's basically a tad bit smarter than a spot healing brush, because a spot healing brush has to find pixels inside the image. Even though it can find pixels all over the image, those pixels have to be in the image. The remove tool can find pixels that have been from images if you will. And so what I'm going to do is I can't click directly on this. Let me see what happens if I click right here. It gives me an orange message. I can't use the tool because the target layer is unsupported. I just want you to see that, and that is just the thing, because the remove tool cannot paint directly on what is basically a smart object. So you're going to have to create a new layer, and I'm going to do that by clicking on this little new icon right there and choose new layer. So, I've said this before, but the app, and Adobe likes to say this too, it's been reimagined. So things are in different locations, and a lot of the good stuff is here, except for the Polygonal Lasso tool. So what I'm gonna do is go down here. Now this guy, let me see if I can move him out. I believe I can. This guy normally sits right here. So like if I had the Lasso tool selected, you would get all the what do you call it? The Boolean stuff, right? The addition, the subtraction right there, the intersection, and that kind of stuff. But I move this guy down here, because why wouldn't I? Because there's that room available, and it's a lot easier. It doesn't like cover up your image. I'll switch back to remove tool. I want you to see this. Click on this guy and make sure sample all layers is turned on. That way, non-destructive. So you're not painting directly on a layer, which you can't in this case, but this way you're painting on the pixel-based layer, sample all layers. And remove after each stroke. I believe that's going to be turned on. And so basically, let me see. I want to see how big my cursor is, because you can't always tell from this little cursor preview right here. But I could just paint away like so, right? And at which point it's going to automatically get to removing. And because I didn't paint over all the post is kind of a ghost post, right? It's going up into that region. That's not what I want, so I'll just undo it. That is available in case you're curious up here. That's the undo. You can also do a 2-finger tap on the screen, or in my case, I just hit Command-Z. So boy, do I wish right now, the hand tool just gives you so much, affords you so much more control if it were here, which it's not. But anyway, what I want to do is I want to do a shift click, paint a straight line. I'm not sure if that's possible, but it's only going to be possible if I don't remove after each stroke. So let's try that. I would paint, and so notice I paint and I get this magenta overlay. And for some reason, my layers palette went away. Panel, sorry, speaking old school. And I want to shift click down there, but that doesn't work. So there's one of the other things that would be easily implemented by anyone who would truly use the software and knew what we expect from it. And Adobe might want to hire one of those. And now I'm going to go ahead and paint over here. So see the click and the shift click, you can see how useful that would be for anybody who just decided to have a keyboard, because many of you do, right? You have keyboards attached to your, I'm using a separate keyboard, but you could be using one that's attached, right? All right, so now what I have to do is press the enter key. Well, that's what I would do on a desktop. Here I have to actually click or tap or whatever it would be on this little check mark right down there to tell Photoshop to start removing, to get rid of that stuff. And it actually did a pretty poor job, as you can see right here. It normally doesn't. And part of the problem with the remove tool, I would advocate for this on a desktop as well. We need to be able to redo that, to just say, okay, that didn't work so good. So just as you would with, what's that thing called? The Generative Fill that we're talking about here. Just as you would with Generative Fill, you'd select another one. So the remove tool would give you 3 different options. I know it's not generative, but it would still do that as a matter of courtesy. Or you could just say, try again, the way you can inside Lightroom and Camera Raw. Anyway, I'm removing the area again. I painted manually, and it's still not that good, so I would paint over here, and I'd press the enter key. Nope, I wouldn't. I'd have to tap the little check mark. Must do things manually because it's the future. We don't do things like press enter keys anymore. And then I wanted to do that one as well, but notice it just doesn't. I painted sloppily. I painted into the curtains. But even if so of course it's going to be misbehaved there. But even if I hadn't, it's not going to do a very good job. All right. right, so just because, gosh, I mean, I could do a lot of things at this point, right? I could go over here and I could say, the object selection tool. I think people want to use the object selection tool. Adobe even recommends you do that, like make super accurate selections. Like I'll try to drag around the T set right there, and it couldn't find an object to select. Well, that happens. I mean, it's not, nobody expects miracles. But even if it had done it properly, let's see what it does with our whale-ish creature. It can't find an object to select. All right, well, you know what? Go away. So I'll just do, it's still, my point really is that you still just want to do general selections. Like here's the rectangular marquee tool, because that way you give it more room, right? If you hit Generative Fill right now, then I am going to get a nice little T-set and it's going to fit inside the scene beautifully. Let's zoom in. Why don't we? Not using the zoom tool because there is not one. I'm going to have to do the old 2-finger pinch. That's why I got the trackpad over here, just for that little maneuver. And now I'll bring back the layers panel and properties panel, which, by the way, Photoshop, you had no business hiding. There was no reason to do that. And now I can see the other T-sets that are available to me. Well, beautiful. And I'll get, you know what? I'm going to try this one because I think that's pretty cool. And now you can just go nuts. What I decided to do, I was trying to zoom using the mouse, but that didn't work out so good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go, it just galls me. And I've already mentioned this, but I want Adobe. I want somebody at Adobe who's paying any attention to me whatsoever. If such things are possible. Look at that divot I just drew. I want to draw this really tall thing right here. And I can shift drag to add to the selection, by the way. So if you got a keyboard, you can do that. And I'm going to add more. And one I'm going to ask for this time using Generative Fill is a really, well, giant. I don't have to say giant because that's obvious. Colorful Jenga. Let's see if it does spell check here. And I believe it does not spell check on a desktop, but it will spell check here on the iPad. But I think that's just an iPad thing. And tower is what I'm looking for. And I'll go ahead and click generate. I think I could hit the enter key. Yeah, I think I've demonstrated that I could do that many, many times. And I'll go ahead and generate a giant Jenga set. If in the fullness of time, of course. And even though it doesn't like the word Jenga, or it shouldn't, this is the kind of thing that Adobe advertises that Firefly doesn't like. It doesn't like to violate other big corporate trademarks, which I think fits in with us, regular people. We want to make sure that one big corporation doesn't violate the trademarks of another big corporation either. That would really harm our creative spirit, wouldn't it? I like that one, don't you? That's really cool, I think. I could have made it match the furniture. It could have been more elegant. And then there's all kinds of additional things you could do, right? You get the idea, I think, at this point. What I want to do is I'm gonna get did you see what I just did? Oh, I want to show you this. So they're not called rectangular marquee and elliptical marquee. They're called marquee rectangle and ellipse rectangle, because they're the only rectangle ellipse tools in this particular software. So we'll make marquee the adjective instead of the noun. Do you see what a nice little flip they did? But notice if I press the M key, I get the elliptical marquee tool. Isn't that interesting? Elliptical comes before Shift M for rectangular. So I'm sure that's just a little blip in the continuum. Now, what I'd like to do is press the Shift key as I do this to get a circle. I can't. You do. That's not, I'm not really knocking it necessarily, and I can't use the space bar thing. Oh, I hit the C key, so that doesn't count. I can't do the space bar thing in order to, don't definitely get me out of there. I hit the C key and it went into the crop tool. So, but with the space bar would let me drag it around. I can't do that. And so I'm shift dragging to create another elliptical guy, and I just am trying to make them circles. Now, if you had the touch ring on screen, which I don't currently, it's a distraction when I'm using the mouse and the keyboard. I don't even know if it will come up if I'm not, if I'm using a second screen like this. But I'm not doing screen mirroring, in other words. But I'm just going to drag a bunch of sort of circles. Let me complete that thought. If I had the ring, then I would tap in it, the touch ring, and I would tap and hold while I drew a circle, a perfect circle. All right, anyway, generative fill, let's do that again. And I'll say, what should we say? Balloons? Should we say colorful? Should we, you and me together, you have no control over the experience? It's not really a we thing so much as you might think. But I'm taking a hit so you don't have to with this generative fill prompt. And I'll go ahead and click. And did you know one of the words of the year? It turned out to be Riz, but one of the words of the year was that was up for grabs was prompt. That was on the list. Anyway, so I just filled out a prompt, didn't I? And I did not get ignored, so that's cool. But did I get? Are these the bubble balloons of my dreams? They are not. So let's see. Gosh, I really thought bubbles would help it be cool looking. Let's say I know. Let's try. I'm arrowing back. I'm pressing the arrow key. It doesn't work. Okay. Reflective. I'm not willing to bet that everything that doesn't go right for me doesn't work necessarily. But anyway, colorful reflective balloons. Not Mylar. I don't like Mylar balloons, do you? They remind me of hospitals. They remind me of, well, it could be birthdays, so couldn't it? Or happy anniversary. Ooh, that's cool. I should have asked. That's what I should have asked for. I should have asked for metal balloons. Anyway, you get the idea, and then you can add, as much as you want to the scene, and you can modify the other elements to fit, and absolutely so forth. Okay, so Photoshop on the iPad needs some work, but if all you need is generative fill, it comes through. And I just know after all that, you're going to have some kind of opinion, in which case shoot me a comment. Not to mention like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And for more of the newest features in Photoshop on the iPad, come on, Adobe can't mess up Liquify, can they? Join me at patreon.com/Deak now. And then go to Deak.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deak McClellan. This is Deak Now.